This town started it all. Yeah, let me explain. Many years ago, I got into the constellation called Orion. I just thought he was the coolest constellation with his big sword hanging from his belt, the hunter. Well, through the years, I eventually became a professional driver, aka truck driver. And I spent a lot of time driving at night. And during the period from fall till spring in Canada, Orion would be up there in the sky. I'd look out the window, look up and see Orion there. And it felt like he was watching over me, which was pretty cool. So, yeah, for the longest time, Orion was always there as my protector. And then one day I thought, I wonder if maybe there's like a town, a city, province, state, whatever, country by the name of Orion. So I decided to Google it. And I came up with this town, Orion, Alberta, which is in the southeast corner of southern Alberta. This is such a cool old building. Let's see if I can zoom in a little. So, one day, I packed my bags, threw everything I owned in my car, and headed west. Original plan? Well, it was for the West Coast. First stop was Edmonton. And this is in November, and it was snowing and blowing and cold. And I thought, I'm not spending 10 months of the year doing this. I left. Headed south, kind of bypassed Lethbridge, went to Grand Forks, visited some friends, family. But I ended up coming back to Lethbridge. Just don't know why. Wasn't even thinking of Orion at the time. Thought it was a neat little town. Remember coming through here years ago. And so I stopped, grabbed a motel room, had myself a good nap. The next morning, grabbed a paper, had my continental breakfast with my coffee, and thought, let's check the classifieds. Went to the classifieds, and there was 2 pages of driver's jobs available. 2 pages. This is when everybody else is having a rough time. So, closed my eyes, took my index finger, plunked it down on the paper, called the company that I pointed at, and got myself a job. Cool one too. Hauling grain through the prairies, which was awesome because I'd never actually seen the prairies before. Yeah, it's great stuff. But all the time I kept thinking to myself, Orion, I gotta get to that town of Orion and see what it looks like. It was just on my mind constantly once I was there. So, one day, I decided, okay, packed lunch, threw it in the car, and headed off to Orion. About an hour and a half to 2 hours from Lethbridge, depending on how many times you stop to look at things. I pulled into Orion, in this little ghost town, and the first thing I saw was this store. I thought, that's neat. It's open. I went inside. I couldn't believe the stuff that was in there. Unbelievable. There was anything and everything. And I met this fellow, Boyd Stevens. Yeah. He lived here all his life. back when there were grain elevators. There he is in the back of a wagon. That's how they used to haul their grain then. There was 350 people, all kinds of stores. And he was there literally all his life. And the stories he had were amazing. One story I found out from a fellow, he used to buy cigarettes from Boyd. And he would ask Boyd for cigarettes. Boyd would open this trap door in the floor, and he would bring out a Tupperware container with a bunch of cigarettes. Which kind would you like? Of all things, eh? And a little trap door in the floor of that hardware store. But yeah, his stories were amazing. It was just sitting there and just listening to him and talking with him was great. There was everything in that store from decades and decades that he had for sale still, along with posters and everything else. That's some solid metal. I love that rad cap. That is so cool. So yeah, and in good shape too. Like all the tires still had air. Anyway, yeah, it was great. Every year I would go down and I would spend an hour or so just sitting there on the bench, talking with Boyd, or inside the store, checking out all the cool stuff he had, including the poster of Marilyn Monroe that he just loved. Yeah, great place. And this happened. Christmas Day, 2016. Store burns down. Well, I found out that Boyd Stevens passed away a couple of months ago. Man, I'm gonna miss you in your store. I like to think you're up there with Orion watching over me right now.